Hello and welcome to the Gaggle Bubble Challenge, and if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, the National Defense Authorization Act has finally passed. You know, no one's was surprised by it. So, it comes in at a whopping, I think, $890 billion. So it's hitting the sort of 1 trillion mark. And of course, if you add all the other expenditures, for instance, when it comes to nuclear weapon, that goes into the Department of Energy budget. And then, of course, when you have all the amount the U.S. spends on intelligence, that's in the intelligence budget.
And the Ukraine piggy bank is separate as well.
Yeah, and then of course, in the meantime, the Biden administration is still negotiating with Congress about this 111 billion that will include money for Ukraine, Israel, and the border. That's still ongoing, so that doesn't count as part of that. But what was interesting about this National Defense Authorization Act is, well, there are two things. One of which was the fact that it includes the renewed authorization for 702, which allows the government to engage in mass warrantless spying on American citizens. I mean, we know this is all part of the post 9/11 world, in which essentially the government found a way not to have to go to the courts and seek a warrant to spy on American citizens. They can do it by spying on foreigners. And then if the foreigner is talking to an American, then they essentially would be listening into conversations involving Americans. But of course,
Germans can spy on Americans, and then they pass the intelligence on to the Americans.
Exactly. That's what Joe was going to do. But what was interesting about this also with this 702 is that once you can do that, once you can spy on foreigners, and then use that to spy on Americans without searching a warrant, is that you can then essentially target Americans, and then you know exactly which Americans you're targeting. So all you need to do is find a foreigner that he's talking to, and then you then spy on that foreigner, and boom, you're spying on the Americans. So
the loop is closed.
The loop is closed. So, but anyway, I mean, the 702 has generated over the years a considerable amount of opposition, again from left and right, and whenever it comes up for a vote, there's always the threat that suddenly there'll be a majority to knock it out, but it never happens, and that's why it's always very good when you have these big supplemental bills, these big agglomerations of things, such as the National Defense Authorization Act or the budget or something like that. You can slip everything in, and rather than have a debate on a particular issue, you have to put it in, because if you don't, hey, there won't be a budget, and then people will go without pay. You'll have servicemen not getting paid. So you have to pass it. It has to be passed.
It always does things that, for the things that are necessary, there's no money. We have no money for it.
Exactly. And that's why
this one, oh God, it's lavish. Okay. How many pages do you think that act is?
no. Yeah. But that's why it's such a slimy way of doing things, because you can't really oppose one of these big budget packages, because they say, well, hey, do you realize that if you don't pass this, then people won't get paid, the parks will no one's going to tend to the parks, and and whatever, just list all the terrible things that happen. And then of course you shove everything in, anything, boom, right, but just before midnight you bung it in. And this is kind of what happened with 702. So let me just show you the way that I think this is yes. So here's the story from The Hill, which is Congress approved short-term. Everything's always short-term extensions of warrantless surveillance powers, and then
that's what they said after 9/11, George.
Yeah, it's always short-term. I was just for a few months. But what's going to happen in a few months? We're going to go through this whole thing again. I mean, that's the great thing about short-term. And then it says, included in the defense policy bill headed to the president's desk is a measure that extends 702, Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act until mid-April. And then it says it allows the government to spy on foreigners located abroad, but Americans who communicate with those being surveilled have their information swept up in the searches.
Swept up. I love that. Swept up.
Rather than targeting. So it's like you remember with Tucker Carlson, because I think he was whoa, that was handy that they already found out about Tucker Carlson's communications when he was trying to arrange an interview with President Putin. And then so here then we have, while the National Defense Authorization Act's inclusion of Pfizer avoids an end-of-the-year expiration of the powers, it also extends an ongoing battle over whether the government should get a warrant before reviewing information it's already collected pertaining to Americans. You see, the thing is that you are never supposed to spy on Americans. Certainly, the intelligence services are not supposed to spy on Americans. If you are going to spy on Americans, you really need to get a warrant. You have to go to court to get a warrant, which means that you're going to have to justify yourself. But the courts, they give lavish authority to government. It's not like the courts, the Justice Department goes to the courts and then you have a judge there. I'm not happy about this.
Yeah, what is it, George?
I don't buy your argument. No, you can't have this authorization.
Well, it's in like the 90th percentile area where when a warrant is presented to one of these courts, it's always passed. Okay,
it's always passed. I mean, exactly. Because the judges say, hey, we aren't in any position to second guess the government. I mean, the government knows, if somebody is under suspicion, then, well, I mean, what do we know? If there's questions about his contacts and whatever, yeah, well, they should know. They've been, they're the experts. So basically everything is passed on. But even that is too much for them, so they don't want to go through the whole warrant process. So they just simply scoop up all these communications. And remember, what's extraordinary about this is all this has been known. Remember, that was the whole point about the Snowden leaks, because the Snowden basically exposed this, that there's mass spying, warrantless spying on Americans. And remember, people said, no, it doesn't happen. Of course, it does happen. And it mass warrantless spying. And then, so that was in 2013, 10 years on, nothing has changed. And several conservative lawmakers voiced frustration over its inclusion in a must-pass bill. And then this is Congressman Chip Roy from Texas. The fact of the matter is, it is impossible to oppose the National Defense Authorization Act because we put a pay raise in it, or because we put something in there that is seemingly so important that we have to ignore the critical destruction of our civil liberties by adding a Pfizer extension right on top of it. But this was really the key. The key was they didn't want a separate vote on this Section 702.
Because you'd have to debate it.
Exactly. So that was it. Yeah, that was the key. They had to shove it into this and therefore avoid the debate. And then it says, Congress renews warrantless digital spying. So this is, I think, from the Reason magazine, kind of a libertarian magazine. This is the spending bill, and it says, a bipartisan effort to reform or shutter the federal government's massive warrantless spying regime ended for now in failure on Thursday morning, as Congress approved a temporary, it's always temporary, renewal of the program. And then it says, this is...
Yeah, but they've been conjuring up, whether to keep or get rid of for 10 years, George. What difference between now and April?
Yeah, nothing, none at all, none at all. And then it says, well, the National Defense Authorization Act cleared its final hurdle in the House with a 310 to 118 vote. 73 Republicans, 45 Democrats opposed its passage. So it's a big, big win. Less than a day after the Senate approved the bill with an 87 to 13 vote. Now, what's interesting again is that the Republicans, by and large, voted for it. This, after all the complaints about the deep state. So you constantly, you go on Hannity and Fox News, the deep state, we got to do something about this, as this invisible hand that they're controlling things. And then when you have a chance to defund the deep state, you don't do it. All the complaints, how they've been targeting Trump, which they have, and then boom, you give them the
authorization. They like that warm and fuzzy feeling of bipartisanship, don't they?
That's right. That's right. And then he says a group of Republicans led efforts in both chambers to remove a temporary reauthorization of Section 702, which allows federal intelligence service agents to collect communication with Americans or foreigners. And then this authorization for 702 was set to expire at the end of the year, but not until April. And then we have Rand Paul, who says extending Section 702 robs Congress of the ability to make reforms now, and likely robs Congress of the opportunity to make reforms anytime in the next year. So yeah, that's true. But what was interesting is that this was Rand Paul wanted to take this out from the NDAA. So as a bipartisan group of 34 senators approved Paul's motion to strip 702 from the final version of NDAA. But the problem is he needed 41 in order to get round the filibuster. So he needed that. So he fell 7 short. And that's it. So that's why it went through. In the House, some conservative lawmakers reportedly slammed new House Speaker Mike Johnson's handling of the NDAA. And then it says Johnson had originally promised to allow a pair of Section 702 reauthorization bills, one with serious reforms and one aimed to expand the program, to come to the House floor for a debate and vote. That didn't happen. Still, the short-term reauthorization means there will be another opportunity in the early part of next year. So again, Johnson, he kind of, talks a good game, but he's not delivering. I mean, this is the minimum. I mean, hey, defund the deep state. I mean, this is what Republicans have been talking about. We're going to defund these people these are not your friends. I mean, we know everything about the FBI and what the CIA is doing. These are not your friends, and you still vote to give these powers.
I might be mistaken, but the first time I came across Mike Johnson's name is that he was interviewed by Glenn Greenwald on exactly these issues.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Wow. Yeah. Wow, geez, it's amazing what power does to you, huh? Yeah, that's right. It's amazing what power corrupts.
That's right. It really is, because I think yesterday, or maybe the day before yesterday, Johnson had lunch with Paul Ryan, and I'm sure during this lunch, Paul Ryan flattered him and said, "Yeah, you want to be, belong to the club of speakers, the people who are sensible, grown-ups, and so on. You don't want to indulge all the wild men." And maybe Johnson was probably persuaded by it.
Yes, it worked. That extra martini kicked in.
That's right. That's right. And then here is the second part of the NDAA, which is kind of interesting, which is Congress approves a bill barring any president from unilaterally withdrawing from NATO. So they shoved in an amendment. So you can't unilaterally withdraw from NATO. We talked about this the other day. I mean, the constitutionality of this is somewhat dubious.
But very dubious, because it's not been done before, so I don't know.
But they needed to get it in before the election.
But George, again, the constitutionality of this it's completely unknown. Okay, so I don't think we don't have to spend a lot of time on it. We already made a video about it. But what is the importance of doing that? Bipartisanship. That's what this is all about. Okay, it is taking, when people vote for everybody think about it. What's the only one thing outside of paying taxes? What is the only one thing all Americans can participate in? It's voting for the president of the United States. It's the single, outside of paying taxes, everybody should pay taxes, but voting for president is the only thing, coast to coast, north to south, that everyone participates in. what if the president of the United States says we need to get out of NATO? He was voted, okay?
Right.
It just again, they just have absolute contempt for democracy.
Well, I think that's right. But
Obviously, against Trump. Okay?
But that's it. Exactly. That's the point. It's directed at Trump. You know, they had to make this clear here. You know, don't even think about it. Don't try it. We passed legislation, but of course, again, you know, you can't pass legislation. You know, we know this is you know, at the very least, it is going to be challenged in the courts. But yeah, I mean, they had to, you know, and then the media can talk about, oh, Trump may threaten to withdraw from NATO, but Congress has now passed legislation prohibiting him from doing so. Oh,
well, I mean, but see, these people aren't smart, George. They're not smart.
Well,
because what Trump, it's a parenthetically, Trump could say the United States suspends its membership. Suspends.
Right.
Okay, which he would have the power to do. Okay, I mean, this is just pandering to elite sensibilities more than anything else. Okay, and it's really insulting. Okay, in my mind. Okay, I mean, what do they want? They just want a Nikki Haley to raise her hand. That's what they want.
Well, the thing about these kinds of legislation, of course, again, you know, the constitutionality, I just don't believe it. But they do pass these laws, and then presidents don't challenge them. I mean, if you remember the War Powers Act that was passed in 1973, I mean, Congress passed it, and Nixon didn't veto it. Now, Nixon was already weakened by Watergate at that stage, but the War Powers Act has been on the books now for 50 years, and no president has challenged it. I think it was always very dubious that Congress can impose restrictions on presidents or war-making powers, but it kind of stays there, and therefore they put this now on the books, and it presents Trump with an issue. Okay, well, if you want to go down this path, well, there's legislation. Do you want to go to the Supreme Court and challenge this legislation? Well, Trump might say, yeah, okay, but I've got other things that I want to go to the Supreme Court about, so I'll just leave it there. So I think there's that aspect of it that, you know, by dint of inertia, you just leave it on the books, even though, you know, it's constitutionally very dubious, to say the least.
Well, also what it is it's an abdication of sovereignty. So it's leaving American security, sovereign security, in the hands of other countries that will determine the parameters of how the United States determines its own security requirements. Why does Lithuania have a role in that?
Right. No, I think so, and I think that it's interesting that legislation that would go the other way has got nowhere. I think Rand Paul, has tried to pass legislation saying, well, you know, any decision by NATO will not have binding force on the United States to go to war short of a congressional vote. And I think Rand Paul has tried to pass legislation that no, before any decision of NATO, there has to be a congressional vote. Boom. The Congress wouldn't pass legislation like that. So yeah, it is essentially Congress is happy to cede sovereignty to this weird body of NATO.
And wanting to induct a country at war with Russia into NATO.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, with all due respect to Rand Paul, again, I really strongly suggest that everybody go to Google, type in NATO Article 5, and actually read what it says, okay? I understand the sensibilities of Rand Paul, but I'm not even sure that's actually necessary, okay? Because if you read what the treaty says, now NATO breaks its word all the time.
Right. But that's really the point. That you're right. I mean, and we've talked about this many times about what Article 5 actually says. However, should there be a crisis, then the administration and all the national security guys are all going to go, that's it. Yeah. Go to war. Boom. No question.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Because what they do not want is public consent.
Exactly. No. Exactly. No debate. There can be no debate. We have to move. And so it says that Congress has approved legislation that would prevent any president from withdrawing the United States from NATO without approval from the Senate or an act of Congress. The measure, spearheaded by Senator Tim Kaine,
of all people.
Yeah, Tim Kaine, was Hillary Clinton's VP nominee, a reliable Russia-gator and hawk and so on, and Marco Rubio.
And little Marco.
Little Marco was included in the annual blah, blah, which passed the House on Thursday, expected to be signed by President Biden. The provision underscores Congress's commitment to the NATO alliance that was the target of former President Trump's ire during his term of office. The alliance has taken on revitalized importance under Biden, blah, blah, especially since Russia's term. And then Kaine, his Kaine being quoted, NATO has held strong in response to Putin's war in Ukraine and rising challenges around the world. He added that legislation, quote, reaffirms U.S. support for this crucial alliance that is the foundation for our national security. It also sends a strong message to the authoritarians around the world that the free world remains united. So notice what they're doing here. There should be no debate. We should just simply go to war. That's it. We just have to stick to this treaty, which doesn't obligate us to a war, but we need to pretend to the public that it does obligate us, and we need to go to war. And then they slip this in. No one knows why. And this is hardly covered anyway. That this is where Congress is going. But it doesn't really matter, because as far as the media and the foreign policy elite and all the characters there, I say, great, thank God we're being protected from Trump.
Job security.
Yeah. Thank God. Now, yeah, that's right. Wow, that's really great.
Oh my God, we're in for good. We can't even get. We're finally in the straitjacket. Oh God, bring me to the padded cell. Okay.
That's right, exactly. Trump was the real threat to us. He might have given us an opportunity to avoid a war.
What is ire? Okay, what policy implications are related to ire?
Ire.
Because he has ire.
Ire.
To run and hide. Chicken Little. That sky is fun because he had ire.
Ire. Yeah. So that was this is a fantastic piece of legislation that they passed, almost $1 trillion. And so Section 702, mass warrantless spying, still there. After all the attacks on Comey and Ray and the rest of them, the people who cooked up Russiagate. I mean, remember what happened with Russiagate? They were all part of it. Oh, give them authorization. Give them, let them go on with their mass warrantless spying, because they're doing such a.
They've learned their lesson. They learned their lesson.
They've learned their lesson, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's what Christopher Wray says whenever he goes to Congress. We've changed. It's all the problems that we had before. Problems, these quite some problems there. You're just going on this mass spying on U.S. citizens. Oh, that's all been rectified. Of course, they haven't been. And and we know, and we've had senators like Senator Mike Lee. He's challenged them on this. He said, no, these issues have not been rectified. But it doesn't matter. They'll still vote for it.
Yeah, it's just so depressing, George, that the Republicans, they love the bluster, they like the bully pulpit and all that, but they don't do jack,
Yeah, exactly.
Really.
Yeah, exactly.
George, at the very beginnings of the gaggle, George pointed out, and I think he's absolutely right, is that Republicans don't want to rule, and even when they have the power, they always seem to be outwitted or willing idiots. Right. No, because they can never control the agenda.
No,
even when if the Democrats had two-seat advantage in the Senate and they had a 5-seat Senate advantage in the House, they'd get everything that they want. Okay.
Right. Yeah, and they did that under Pelosi. I mean, that's what they did in Pelosi. They had, I think, a majority of 5 in the House, and And you know, they impeached Trump with a majority of 5 in the House. So yeah, that's exactly right. So the Republicans are absolutely terrified of
Well, Mike Johnson is a perfect example. I mean, that guy flipped on a dime, didn't he? He flipped on a dime.
Yeah.
Woo.
Yeah. No, yeah, exactly. They, they want to be in the good graces of, the New York Times and all the important people, important institutions in Washington and New York. They hate being hated, and that's the thing. They're just absolutely terrified of being hated. So this minimum, the minimum,
being hated, George, is what gets me up in the morning.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. So the minimum, which is, hey, cut off the funding to the deep state, and the minute, like, cut off the funding for Jack Smith. Just say, that's it. We're not going to fund Jack Smith's investigation of Trump anymore. I mean, this whole thing is bogus. They haven't even done that. So, and then they're surprised. Then they don't do well at election times, because, hey, there's another election coming up, and you're not giving too many reasons for people to vote for you. I mean, what's the reason?
George, we talked about in a previous video, but the American people are given fewer and fewer reasons actually to vote.
Right.
Okay, they're strangling it. They're strangling democracy to the point where people become indifferent to it. Okay, I mean, what's the point? What's the point? And on top of it, George, will it be a fair election? I mean, that is a legitimate question now.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. But it is very funny. I mean, if you look at the Republicans, they were, now for almost now 10 years, they've only done well when they have Trump there on the ticket. I mean, Trump pushes them over the line. The moment Trump's not on the ticket, Republicans are just not giving their voters any reason to vote for them, because they know you're not going to do anything. You make really these promises and you're not going to do anything.
It's really interesting you say that, because as you were saying that, I was thinking about, okay, what Republican do I like? And it's J.D. Vance, but I don't think of him as a Republican. Right. I don't tightly associate him with the party. I associate with him with conservatism. Okay. Right. And so they don't even have a standard bearer outside of Trump.
No, they don't. They really don't. And I think that's so they got themselves here. I mean, these are votes that are really easy to do. I mean, I just, if you can't even do this, the Section 7. I mean, how many of those Republicans actually voted for this amendment? I mean, they all pretty much all vote for this amendment about, constraining a president, and that would be their own president, their own, because it's obviously directed at Trump. He can't withdraw from NATO. And then even that, oh no, heaven forbid, we don't want to upset, the establishment. Imagine if David Ignatius is going to write a mean column about us.
Going back to this legislation barring a president withdrawing the U.S. from NATO, what that essentially does, it puts the nexus of power into Chuck Schumer's hands and Lindsey Graham's hands, not the president of the United States.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
And John Fetterman.
That's right. Exactly. And it is obvious that that's not what the framers intended. But they think, we can just intimidate, legislation on the books. I mean, it's just the same with the War Powers Act. That's, hey, well, we've got the War Powers Act, therefore it has to be, Congress has the final say in this.
We can end on this, but think of, George, the scope and magnitude that the elites will go to deform the republic because of one man, because of a person.
Right.
Okay. They've damaged so many things. Who trusts the FBI now? You and I were brought up, remember the TV series? That was a good series. I like that. Okay.
Ephraim Zimbalist Jr.
Yeah. I mean, they were like the real G-men, they were humorless and they were matter of fact, and, they were cold, okay, J. Edgar Hoover read every single script apparently, but anyway, but still, the sense of confidence. There's no confidence in the FBI, the intelligence community. You want to trust them.
Right.
Congress, people despise them.
Right.
They despise the media. Look at the cable TV. I mean, they're all in the dumps right now. No one, fewer and fewer people are watching it. Just across the board. And then this anti-Semitism thing, and now academia is, devouring itself. Okay, wow, everybody's a winner on this one here. This is every single step of the way, just chipping away any kind of hope of
right. No, I think
quality civic life.
Yeah, I think that's right. And of course, there's another group that belongs to that list is the judges. I mean, who the hell is going to believe any judge? I mean, it's like, a judge decides, Trump needs to do this. Judge upholds a gag order against Trump. And you thought, okay, who appointed this judge? Oh, well, he's an Obama judge. Oh, he's a Biden judge. No one's going to take any ruling seriously, because I know these are political actors, and they use the courts in order to do politics.
I'm waiting for Senator John Kennedy he's from
Louisiana.
I'm waiting because YouTube has a plethora of videos of him cross-examining judge appointees. I'm waiting for this one. This is the one I'm waiting for. Mr. Wannabe judge, can you explain to me what the term separation of powers means?
Yes, right.
And they will not know the answer.
No,
they will not know.
Exactly. These are all political appointments, and they want political decisions. I mean, that's also, why would anyone have any respect for the courts and the judges or anything like that, or prosecutors? These are all political actors, and essentially that they're totally discrediting themselves, because it's essentially, no one's going to take the court seriously, and that's a big deal, because that involves law enforcement, and therefore, the fairness of a legal, judicial, criminal system. And once people lose faith in that, then people start taking things into their own hands. I mean, there's only a reason why people don't take matters into their own hands. They have trust in an independent legal criminal system.
I've said that, during the hiatus between now and your next live stream, I might watch The Sopranos, but actually I may rewatch the John Adams documentary, which is extremely good. And the reason why I'm thinking about it right now is that John Adams, when he was a lawyer in Boston, this is before the 1776, there were a group of British soldiers that got into a scuffle. And the local crowd, blamed the British soldiers, and they wanted a lynch mob. Well, John Adams said, no, let's figure out the case. Let's figure out the facts of the case. And he defended them. Yeah. And he was one of the great proponents of independence. And he got them off because he believed in the law. Okay, if he scored political points by giving these guys the gallows, yeah. But he wouldn't go there. It was wrong. But we don't have those kind of judges anymore.
No, I think, and that's
for a long time actually now.
Right. I mean, and it goes back to right at the beginning of Western civilization with the great Aeschylus, the Oresteia, which was it's about you take vengeance out of the hands of individuals and the administration of justice into the hands of an independent body. But if that independent body isn't independent at all and is just a victim of the whims of political actors, then what do? People then say, well, I need to take
I'll do it.
my own hands.
Yeah, right.
And so this is a very dangerous game that these judges are playing. And maybe even more dangerous than the intelligence agencies and the domestic spying agencies. I mean, these judges, because people lose faith in the courts, then all hell breaks loose.
Just I suppose because Tucker is starting his own media company, we're going to have a lot of exposure to Tucker, and George and I will probably talk about it a lot. But he, in one of his recent interviews, he echoed exactly what George and I have been saying: is that all of these indictments, he doesn't understand them. Right. I don't understand them. George doesn't understand them. I mean, and that's just the point here. I mean, if none of us can understand what was going on here, how can that be just?
Yeah. No, so it's exactly right. So it's a a very and just again to conclude, there's also a very good film, Unforgiven. It was a Clint Eastwood, which he won an Oscar for. Easily his best film. What happens when you do take matters into your own hands and you see total destruction of civilization? You see a town completely destroyed. There's nothing left. Everyone is dead. The town is just wrecked in ruins because somebody decided to take matters into their own hands. And I think that's a very much a kind of parable for what could happen in America.
Next 12 months.
Right.
It'll be very turbulent, everybody. Right. All right, everybody. This is Friday. This is kind of our week wrap. And we're going to keep an eye on all the stories that we've covered today. This is the Gaggle with Peter and George. It is Friday. The hiatus has started. Like I said, I'm tossing up in the air different serials, waiting for George's next live stream on Tuesday.
It's Tuesday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Please join me. Come with comments, criticisms, suggestions on the way out the door. Think about little Buddy, because Buddy's saying, yeah, this business of taking things into my own hands, I might just do that. And I think, he's decided that, this tip jar, he can't leave it to me. I'm just so useless at it. So, in order to avoid this, if you have a few bob in your pocket, whip them out, dunk them in his tip jar. That might soothe his ruffled feathers. So we're very, very grateful for all of your help, friendship, and support. The more of these, more you can donate, the more of these videos we can make, the more we can improve the technology, and above all, we can do something about the buddy problem. Remember, if you like the Gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.